The latest technology is being used to map one of the oldest living cultures on Earth. A team of archaeologists has traveled to the Northern Territory for a large-scale rock art survey, and they're warning that some of these sites could be gone within 20 years. Picture a stretch of land archaeologists had long written off as empty. Nothing worth studying, no sign of ancient settlement, no artifacts worth cataloging. Then one day, a satellite scan picked up something beneath the surface that stopped the whole team cold. There was open space underground, but its shape was wrong for a natural cave. Straight edges, sharp corners. When the crew finally got inside, the mystery only deepened. The skeletons they found were dated to roughly 120,000 years old. Around them, signs of deliberate burial, woven fiber remnants, spaces that looked purpose-built for ritual. But the real shock was still ahead. On the walls were paintings that appeared to show the internal structure of the human body, and in image after image, the same tall, strange figure kept reappearing. The real question was never the age of the paintings. It was where people from that far back could have gotten this kind of knowledge in the first place. Stick around, because what turned up next made this discovery even harder to explain. Before we go further, hit subscribe. This whole thing didn't start as a hunt for a cave. Archaeologists today are increasingly using new technology to document ancient cultures and rock art sites worldwide in Australia's northern territory has become a major focus for these large-scale surveys, an effort to record images and markings that have sat on exposed rock for thousands of years before they're gone for good. That urgency has only grown since experts warn some of these sites could deteriorate past recognition within 2 decades. It began with a routine geological survey in a remote, barren stretch of land, nowhere anyone expected to find history. No ruins, no artifacts, no trace of a settlement had ever turned up there, so the team expected nothing more than standard soil and rock data. Then something in the satellite imagery caught their eye. An open pocket beneath the ground where there shouldn't have been one. At first they assumed a software glitch. They reset the system, rescanned, same result. They tried different angles, different filters, cross-checked older imagery. Every time, the same structure appeared. And its shape was the real surprise. Natural caves tend to be irregular, uneven. This one had straight edges, defined corners, and depth that changed in a consistent pattern. Some researchers began to suspect it hadn't formed naturally at all amidst where that someone had shaped it. But if that was true, who had done it out here in the middle of nowhere? Once the anomaly showed up in the scans, researchers started asking around locally, and what they heard only added to the mystery. Travelers through that stretch of hills reportedly kept their distance. Some said animals avoided grazing nearby. Others claimed sound behaved oddly there, that shouting into the hills didn't produce the echo you'd expect in that terrain. None of it was scientifically verified, but after the satellite data, the team wasn't ready to dismiss it either. A small crew was sent to investigate. On arrival, they found a shallow pit and scattered broken rock. At a glance it looked natural, but the fracture patterns didn't read as ordinary erosion. A handheld scanner picked up open space directly behind the rocks, matching the depth seen from orbit. There was also a straight vertical seam in the rock and a band of differently colored stone, suggesting a passage had once been open there. When thin probes were pushed through the cracks, a faint current of air came through from the other side, confirmation that empty space really was back there. Lab tests on rock samples turned up traces of organic residue, raising the possibility that something living, human or otherwise, had once had contact with this place before the passage was sealed. Excavation funding came through. The team expected one chamber. What they found was a tunnel that kept going. Once the blockage was cleared, the tunnel dropped away sharply underground, a steeper descent than anyone had planned for. A short distance in, something else caught their attention. The tunnel walls were smooth, almost polished in places, as if something had repeatedly moved along the same path for a very long time. The wear ran consistently in one direction throughout the passage. One geologist on the team said it was hard to write that off as coincidence. It suggested the tunnel had seen repeated use before it was closed off. Deeper in, the atmosphere shifted. Sound stopped carrying the way it should. Voices seemed to die out nearby instead of traveling. Footsteps faded fast, making it hard to judge distance in the dark. Some crew members called the silence unnatural. Field notes speculated the tunnel's geometry might be dampening sound, though nothing confirmed that. Further along, the passage would pinch narrow, then widen again at oddly regular intervals, each wider pocket holding a small side alcove, clean of the usual debris or mineral buildup. The evenness of the spacing made some researchers wonder if the layout had been designed on purpose. Prehistoric humans are known to have documented their world inside caves, but here, before a single painting had even appeared, the structure itself was already raising questions. Then their lights caught the wall, where a faint green glow seemed to trail deeper into the dark. As the team pushed further, that green glow along the walls grew more distinct, long mineral veins running through the stone that lit up faintly under their lamps. It wasn't isolated to one or two spots. The glow tracked a good distance along the tunnel. Some argued it was just a natural mineral reaction. Others asked why, if that were true, it ran so continuously along the path, almost like it had once marked the way. No firm answer emerged. Then the air monitors threw up another puzzle. At that depth, the crew expected noticeable shifts in air quality and oxygen. Instead, the readings barely moved. One technician described the air as suspiciously stable, like something out of a controlled environment, despite no obvious second opening or vent nearby to explain it. Had something once regulated the airflow in here? No direct evidence answered that either way. Odd markings started showing on the walls, too. Long, straight, unusually clean lines, smoother than typical stone tool marks. The team split on it. Some thought natural geology could still produce lines like these. Others, struck by how uniform they looked, suspected they'd been cut deliberately. Vibration scans added another layer. Hollow spaces behind walls that looked solid, none of them on the earlier cave map, and several seemed to follow a repeating pattern rather than random gaps. By now, the team had a growing list: glowing mineral veins, unnaturally stable air, clean tool-like marks, hidden voids arranged in patterns. None of it alone proved advanced technology had been at work here. But stacked together, this was starting to look far more complicated than an ordinary cave. Then, in the lower gallery, they found something that geology alone couldn't explain. Someone had once been here. Moving down through the tunnel, the team finally reached a gallery where it became unmistakable. Someone had lived, or at least spent real time, in this place. Ahead of them opened a wide, surprisingly organized chamber with a flat, solid floor. At its center sat a low stone platform surrounded by scattered fragments of varying size. At first, these looked like ordinary rockfall. Closer inspection told a different story. Clean edges, near identical thickness, a shaping pattern that didn't match known tool-making traditions from the region. While the team was still documenting the fragments, someone on the far side of the chamber spotted a hand poking through hardened soil. Careful excavation revealed a complete skeleton, but not sprawled as if from an accident, but positioned deliberately on its side. A second skeleton turned up nearby, then a third. Their arrangement made an accidental death unlikely. This looked like deliberate burial. Then came the dating. Samples were sent off, and the results deepened the mystery rather than resolving it. Roughly 120,000 years old. If accurate, these remains predated any known organized culture from the region by a wide margin, and didn't fit the standard picture in which humans from that era lack organized living or storage spaces like this one. The skeletons themselves had odd features too, broadly human in shape, but with somewhat elongated limb bones and pronounced brow ridges, consistent across multiple individuals rather than a single anomaly. Initial analysis couldn't cleanly match them to any known population from that place or period. With the skeletons documented, the team turned to the surrounding soil, since even small details might reveal how these people had actually lived. Near the stone platform, similar depressions kept appearing in the soil, not randomly scattered, but arranged in something close to a grid, suggesting items may once have been stored here in a deliberate order. That would mean this wasn't a brief stopover, but a planned, organized space, which, given the proposed 120,000-year date, only deepened the puzzle. A thin layer of soot turned up over the soil, and testing reportedly showed a composition different from typical wood or plant-burning residue at prehistoric sites, hinting, to some researchers, at a more controlled heat or light source, though that stayed speculative. Soil samples then produced something unexpected, tiny fragments of woven fiber. Their survival alone was surprising, implying the chamber's environment had stayed remarkably stable over a very long time, and raising the separate question of whether these people knew how to weave. Faint geometric scratches on the walls added to the picture, simple shapes and lines, not randomly placed, that some researchers thought resembled a layout or reference system of some kind. Whether it amounted to language, signage, or something else entirely, no one could say. But the arrangement clearly wasn't accidental. The picture was shifting. This no longer looked like a shelter. It looked like an organized space for storage, living, maybe even work. But the next chamber wasn't about survival at all. For the first time, the team found signs pointing toward belief and ritual. Past the organized chamber, the passage narrowed sharply, tight enough that the team had to move through single file. After a stretch, it opened again into a new chamber with a noticeably different feel. Lights hit the walls and revealed faint marks. Once layers of soil and mineral buildup were cleaned away, shapes and dark pigment began to emerge. Clusters of uneven lines here, repeating curved patterns there. None of it matched known prehistoric art from the region, and the placement felt deliberate, almost as if it were meant to draw the eye from one image to the next. Near the far wall sat a stone slab, slightly raised, its top surface carefully flattened, with residue clinging to the edges. Later analysis reportedly found a mix of ash, pigment, and an unidentified organic material, suggesting repeated use for some specific purpose. Some on the team likened it to an altar. Others thought it might have been used to prepare ritual materials. Its true function stayed unclear. A badly weathered scene on a nearby lower wall showed small, human-like figures kneeling in a semicircle beneath a larger figure with arms outstretched, its head and upper body too worn to make out clearly. Some read it as a scene of offering or submission, but the damage made certainty impossible. Then came handprints in two colors, a top row of complete prints, and a lower row with fingers missing or altered. Different groups, different roles, a ritual marker? No one could say. As they kept working the ritual chamber, the team noticed stones arranged deliberately on the floor. Not scattered, but forming a near-complete circle, its inner edges scorched from repeated fires, not just one. The obvious explanation, cooking, warmth, didn't sit entirely right with some researchers once they considered everything else nearby. The altar-like slab, the layered handprints, the deliberately buried skeletons already found upstream. Together, it raised the possibility that this fire, too, had been part of something ritual, used repeatedly in a specific way, for a purpose no one could pin down. And the underlying problem remained the same. If the earlier dating held up, organized ritual behavior, this old raised questions far beyond this one chamber. The room still had one more secret. At the far end, a passage appeared blocked with stone. Not the random look of a ceiling collapse, but something arranged with more intent. As the crew slowly cleared it, the temperature around them began to shift, and a thin stream of unusually dry air escaped from behind the stones, a sign that whatever lay beyond had likely stayed sealed off from the outside world for a very long time. The moment the last stone came away, dry air rushed out of the sealed chamber. Lights swept the walls, and the team froze. Nearly the entire chamber was covered in paintings, and remarkably well-preserved ones, with colors far more vivid than anyone expected from something sealed this long. The largest panel showed several human figures standing in a loose circle, but not ordinary figures. Markings around their hands, ribs, and skulls looked, on closer inspection, like anatomical diagrams of internal structures. A medical consultant later called some of the detail unusually precise, which raised an obvious problem. If the 120,000-year dating on the remains held up, how did people from that era have this kind of insight into human anatomy? Ancient art often reflects what people saw and lived through, but this level of internal detail didn't fit easily into that explanation. To the right of the same panel stood another figure, taller than the rest, with elongated limbs, a slender frame, and a stretched-looking head with no clear facial detail. Nothing about its shape matched any known hominin. It appeared to be watching the group, a dark line extending from its hand toward the humans nearby, read by some on the team as a gesture of guidance or instruction, though that remained interpretation, not fact. The next panel was harder to explain still. A human figure lying on the ground, two others standing at its sides, the same tall figure looking on from above. The chest of the prone figure appeared open, its internal organs depicted. Ritual sacrifice or some early form of surgery or anatomical study? No answer was clear. But if it was purely symbolic, the accuracy of the internal detail was still hard to account for. Piecing the murals together, the team began to suspect they weren't separate images, but chapters of one larger story. One painting showed a group standing around a fire pit, flames rendered in layered colors that gave a sense of motion, hands raised skyward, and the tall figure present again, surrounded by small, broken shapes that resembled falling bodies or scattered remains. Destruction, sacrifice. The meaning stayed ambiguous. Another mural was stranger still, an entire landscape shown breaking apart, dark forms rising from the ground, figures fleeing toward a narrow path, and in one corner, the tall figure standing alone, not running, simply watching. Some wondered if the artist meant to show a figure that already knew what was coming. But caution mattered here too. Nothing in the region's geological record matches a catastrophe on that scale, so the painting shouldn't be read as a literal record of a real event. It could just as easily be symbolic. Still, two things kept nagging at the team: the anatomical precision and the same unidentified figure recurring across multiple scenes. At that point, the field crew couldn't interpret it alone, and images went out to outside specialists, pulling in doctors, anthropologists, and geologists. The first question from specialists was obvious. Could the paintings simply be much later additions to an older cave and older remains? If so, most of the mystery would evaporate. But reported radiometric testing found no meaningful gap between the pigment's age and the chamber's older context, undercutting that theory. Anthropologists then took on the anatomical question directly. Human figures are common enough in prehistoric art, but a clear precedent for this kind of internal detail proved hard to find. Some argued the images were being read too literally, that they might be purely symbolic. though the apparent precision around ribs, chest, and organs made that explanation feel incomplete to others. To them, it looked closer to an early medical diagram than decoration. Then there was the tall figure. Maybe a spirit, a deity, a mythic character, but why did its proportions stay so consistent across separate scenes? Comparisons to early cave art elsewhere in the world turned up nothing similar. The panel resembling surgery or sacrifice only sharpened the debate. Medical consultants zeroed in on how the chest and organs were positioned, while some researchers floated the idea that this knowledge could have come from long observation and trial and error, a theory others pushed back on by asking where the rest of the archaeological record for that kind of practice was. Geologists compared the destruction scene against known impact and environmental catastrophe records and found no match. A few floated the idea it might represent a predicted future event, though nothing substantiated that. In the end, opinion split. One camp saw an extraordinarily advanced prehistoric symbolic imagination. The other believed that if the dating and supporting evidence held, this discovery could genuinely challenge the accepted timeline of human history. Was this meant as a message for the future? As work on the paintings continued, a separate question crept in. Why wasn't this shared publicly right away? According to claims that later surfaced, internal discussions reportedly argued the images shouldn't go public until the context around them was better understood, the stated reasoning being that incomplete information spreads fast as misinformation. After that, reports emerged that site access had been restricted, with only a small number of researchers allowed to continue, and some given partial documentation rather than the full archive. A few of the original analysts claimed their statements were later rewritten in more cautious language for official summaries, with some concerns quietly dropped from final reports. None of this proves deliberate concealment. It could just as easily be routine administrative caution. Official accounts have described the find as unusual but manageable. Meanwhile, some researchers kept their own private notes on the side, and from those notes came an intriguing question. Were these paintings made only for the people of that time, or deliberately recorded so someone far in the future might one day find them? Put together, the recurring tall figure, the internal human detail, the destruction scenes, several explanations remain on the table: a warning, a record of something real, a symbolic account of belief, or a message aimed at the future. None of them has been proven. If this discovery genuinely has the power to reshape our understanding of human history, independent dating, excavation records, skeletal analysis, pigment chemistry, and peer review will all need to confirm it. And if that verification holds up, the question stops being just about what humans knew 120,000 years ago. It becomes whether we've badly underestimated the intelligence, organization, and beliefs of early humans, or whether there's still a piece of this story we haven't recognized yet. What do you think? An ancient symbolic story, a record of a forgotten human culture, or a warning meant for people far in the future? Let us know in the comments.